So since the buzz of art basil having chilled out a bit, let's talk about the art of basil. Sweet Thai basil is the one that I'm currently growing, along with a few others like Genovese, some lemon basil, Vanaholi basil. Some other varieties that I've really liked in the past too are dark opal, the purple basil, incredible. This one, I have a couple of these plants and they seem to be doing pretty well this time of year, especially the ones that are here in this little greenhouse. But outside they will be susceptible to a little insect called leaf miner. I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but pretty easy to grow, just very fun to use in the kitchen in sauces. If I'm making a pizza sauce or any tomato sauce. So I love growing this plant, but we do have to monitor it frequently if you're looking for a productive, unblemished harvest. All right, let's talk a little bit about the maintenance and how not to pinch off the tips. If you yank with a little too much force, then this happens. You might pull it from underneath the node. The key here will be to use some pruners so you can prune above the node. Input sound effect here. Bloop. Make sure to disinfect your pruners before and after each use. Rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, or vinegar, and allow them to air dry. However, you're not gonna really need your pruners all that much. Most of the work can be done by hand. You're just gonna carefully pinch off the leaves that have the leaf miner damage. And patience will be a virtue in this step. If we take a closer look in real time, what I'm doing, it's essentially just pinching off the leaves from the main stem. And as you can clearly tell, this plant was in much need of some rehabilitation. Now, pruning the flowers off of the plant is going to encourage the plant to get taller and bushier in the weeks to come, so we're gonna do just that. Pinching off the leaves will help mitigate and suppress the leaf miner's life cycle. But in order for this plant to get big, we're gonna go a couple inches below the flower of where the flower is growing, and we're gonna prune right above the node here. Bloop. There you go. Now, every time that I do this, everything that I remove, I put in a cup. Won't make sense to compost any of this, so make sure to throw it in the trash. And again, make sure it's above the node. Above the node means right above that part right there where the new growth is popping up from. And I told you patience is a virtue, so while you're doing this activity, turn up the tunes in the background and just keep going at it. Keep picking, pinching, and plucking the 3 P's of basil remediation. As always, be mindful of your posture. Make sure your back isn't cranked. And just reaccommodate yourself as needed, since this task could take 10 to 15 minutes, especially if you have a couple of plants. So the biggest hack here is just to keep an eye on them weekly. Stay on top of them. Don't let those little leaf miners bully you any longer. Ultimately, you just have to be hands-on so it doesn't get out of hand. See what I did there? A few last things to highlight here. Growing herbs in South Florida, you're gonna have a better chance growing it in partial sun because they're not very heat tolerant or drought tolerant. So putting it somewhere where it's gonna get 4 to 5 hours max of sunlight will be your best bet. And when it comes to watering, just make sure your soil does not dry out. You're gonna want your soil to stay saturated, relatively moist at all times. So that means watering every day, potentially every other day. So stay on top of this as well. Keep in mind, a leaf miner will do just that, mine tunnels in the leaves of your plants. The larva eventually becomes a little fly with the capacity to lay eggs all over again. So to prevent the cycle from reoccurring, we just gotta make sure we throw it in the trash.